A new year also means that there's great enlightenment, more enthusiasm among all of us to ask greater questions, but also exert some information from government officials and get more expectations. Well, so this time around, marking what we call the Constitution Day in our country now, which is now a holiday, we also decided to also start the whole show, have a greater conversation with the Minister of Information, Oppong, Nkrumah, who is also the Member of Parliament for Oppong. He's here in the studio. Right there, we told you about it. Good morning to you.
Morning.
And thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
Many happy returns.
I haven't seen you the whole year.
Yeah, we just began the year, actually. I took a week off last week.
I noticed. Yeah. Kojo was multitasking.
Yes,
and I think it
was the Lone Ranger, so to speak.
Yeah.
But there are many things that are happening around.
True.
But it's been a good year the last year, hasn't it been?
It has generally been a good year and a good wrap to our first 2 years in office, during which period, as we consistently said, our major target was to correct what the president describes as the mess that we inherited, or to correct the ills of the structure of the Ghanaian society and prepare for a building upon it, which starts, I think, in earnest this year. And I think generally the year ended fairly well for a good number of Ghanaians. We have an opportunity to build upon it in 2019 and 2020. And as we start off the new year, and we wish everybody a happy new year, for those of us who are seized with the charge to deliver, we can't help but very quickly get to work.
There are many things that will be on the heart of many Ghanaians, but from my perspective, you do a sampling of what some reactions have been to government policies. I would say some of them would be mixed. Of course, free SHS is always getting some good thumbs up, and the many parents are very much appreciative of the initiative, but some of them still tend to get in the way of perhaps communities not having good roads, and so they will be agitating unless you have to tell them that the next budget has a good budget in itself for that sort of infrastructure. How do you tend to relate to that?
I think it is for those who do not understand the structure of governance and may I say the contemporary history of development in Ghana, who may think that there's something wrong when you have obstruction to government policies and programs, or when you have feedback or dissenting views. And perhaps this will even fit very well into our Constitution Day discussion. We want a democracy. We want a system of government that allows the various constituencies, not just the geographic constituency, but the various groupings of Ghanaians to have a view. The Constitution, for example, guarantees us freedom of thought, so to have a view, and to have the freedom and the ability to express that view and to influence government policy and programs with that view. And therefore, at every step of the way, when a government is formed and it outlines its first of all, remember that you will go for an election. And the Constitution says that you only need half plus one of valid votes, not 100%. In fact, right from day one, at least about 49% plus are allowed to be in opposition to your ideas. But the Constitution says that if you get 50% plus one, you are the legitimate person to be given the mandate to run the affairs of the country. And that means that from day one, as you commence your exercise, you should expect that there will be opposition. You should expect that there will be disagreement. You should expect that there will be commentary. The important thing is whether you are dismissive of those views or whether you engage and accommodate as much as possible a good number of the views that come in. So you'll notice that throughout our constitutional dispensation, especially since we came into it in 1993, every step of the way you will find dissenting voices. You will find civil society groups, some of which may genuinely do some work and offer an alternate view. You find political actors who want to rubbish everything you're doing, but you must have the appetite to accommodate all of this, but still keep focus on deliver on your agenda, but importantly, not be dismissive or disrespectful of the views that other people may bring.
And it's good that you
mentioned
the Constitution Day, but there are many out there who still think it's not as relevant as it should be. And what we are rebuttal argument?
I mean, first of all, as I mentioned, we want a democracy. We want a nation in which people have dissenting views and have the freedom and the opportunity to express it. We don't want a society in which, when government says X, 100% of the people must say X, else there'll be consequences. No, that is indeed the essence of the Constitution that we are living with or within. And actually, that is the essence of having a day like this. Now, just a bit of history. In 1957, Ghana attained independence. And for those who are familiar with the law, if you read, for example, the Independence Act and understand what really happened, we had a parliament, we had a prime minister, we could pass our own laws. But to a large extent, still, the British Crown held sway over us. On the 1st of July 1960, Ghana promulgated for itself our first constitution, which made Ghana a republic. Sovereignty, therefore, resided with the people. If you go to the United Kingdom, for example, sovereignty resides with the Crown. In Ghana, because we had a constitution, sovereignty now resided with the people. The people were the final deciders of every matter. Now, our expectation was that that first Republican Constitution will ride on up till today and we'll be building upon it. Unfortunately, somewhere in February 1966, it was overthrown. 1st July 1960, which marked Republic, was overthrown in February 1966. And the Republic that we tried to build was jettisoned. We tried a second Republic, I think somewhere around 69 or so. That was also overthrown. That was Buzia, President Akufo, that was overthrown. We tried a third republic led by Dr. Hillary Mann. That was also overthrown. And we were literally in the wilderness trying to find a way that allowed us to govern ourselves in the best manner possible. Now, in 1992, we promulgated a new constitution. The Constituent Assembly led it. Chairman Rawlings at the time was in charge, led the exercise. The Constituent Assembly went through the process. I think D. Evanan also was chair at the time. And then we went for a referendum and accepted the Constitution in 1992, which brought us into what we call the Fourth Republic. And very often we keep rattling the Fourth Republic, but sometimes it's lost on us why we have a Fourth Republic, and countries like America also just have one republic because they haven't suffered the shocks that we have. So what we have today is the Fourth Republic, which starts on the 7th of January. It's a day on which Parliament is sworn in, the President is sworn in, when any new government commences its activity. And government is of the view, therefore, that properly so called, that day must be recognized for what it is, as a day for introspection. A day not for celebration and fanfare, but a day for introspection. A day that we spend time reflecting on our fourth Republican constitutional democracy, how we have come here, what this fourth Republican constitutional democracy is, the parts that are working well that need to be deepened, the parts that need to be examined. Because all over the world, we always talk about building a more perfect nation. We always need an opportunity to introspect and see what we are doing and see how to build upon it. So
and we need a day to do that?
Of course. I mean, traditionally, we have celebrated the day of our Republican status
on 1st July
as a public holiday. We have traditionally celebrated it as a public holiday. It is that same...
so it's just a substitution?
It is that same recognition, but we are putting it in its proper context, which is the 7th of January. But it's not a day necessarily for celebration and fanfare and partying, but it's a day for introspection. And that's why from this year, we're starting off with a public lecture series. Next year, you notice us add to it activities at the district level that cause all of us to come to that national consciousness and examine how we can build upon this democracy. Today, what we are doing, this media practice where you have the freedom to operate as a journalist and you can express opinions and ask questions, and government will sit with you and respond. It is a product of the Fourth Republican Constitution. People take it as a given. We need to know it, understand it, see how to build on it.
And because you're a lawyer, it even puts all the discussions into better perspective, because then you would know, you and your colleagues have argued over the years, even as media, that our constitution is fraught with certain problems. Of course, we had a commission, and subsequently there's supposed to have been a white paper. And so we know and acknowledge that we had difficulties with the constitution. By celebrating what it is that we're celebrating, then aren't we relegating what we need to do as a state to correct what is fraught with our constitution?
You are exactly making my point for me, because the exercise of constitutional review, constitutional examination, building on the constitution and constitutionalism is not an event. It's not a one-off thing we need to do and forget. It is something we need to institutionalize and annually examine. When you have a constitution day like what we have an opportunity every day to ask ourselves, how far have we come with our constitution and constitutionalism? What more are we learning? What more can we do?
How has this then worked? It brings into focus.
It brings it into very sharp focus on an annual basis. Of course, the process of reviewing the constitution is not jettisoned. There's a report, there's a white paper. Today, for example, at a public lecture on constitutionalism, I'll be surprised if the keynote speaker, Professor Bonte Simpson, does not have any ideas on where we should. I'll be surprised, because that is really the essence of a day like this, where we have an opportunity to examine and to introspect, and so it will put it into sharper focus year on year. I've had several conversations. Article 71, ex gratia, what should be done to it? When the president is out of republic, must we necessarily swear? We've had all of these side conversations. We have an opportunity now on an annual basis to be examining and building upon it.
What is happening? What will happen to that commission's report? Of course, we had a white paper.
Well,
what's even happening to
well, government will make some very clear pronouncements on the next step of, building upon our constitution after today. I don't want to take the wind out of the sail before that official communication is done. But it starts with a day like this, to have an opportunity to examine and to introspect, and then the next steps will be made known to us.
Okay, so the next step would mean that we're going to reconstitute another commission?
You're trying to fish it out of me in another way, but as I'm mentioning, government will have an opportunity to make a very clear statement on that post today's activities.
I've seen some hashtag, Ask the Info Ministry, and what's it about?
My understanding is that people have various questions. Sometimes, for example, when we engage, it is your questions and your issues that you want to ask me, or it is what I want to talk about. But we do this in the name of and on behalf of the millions of your viewers who are out there. And so as we appear on various platforms, it gives us an opportunity also to get feedback on the things that the everyday Ghanaian wants us to respond to, and then we're able to respond to some of them. And I'm sure some will come through your platform this morning, as it would on some of your other platforms. I'll be on Asempa, I think, tomorrow. I understand they are using the same hashtag so that they filter in the issues, and then we're able to respond. All
right, so then we do it complementarily?
Yes.
Okay, using the same hashtag and giving it the right activations. Okay. But topical currently is the announcement by the Bank of Ghana about the state of the banks that we have, how many we have, but at the end of the day are the human issues, the customers who relatedly perhaps will have an information or not about their state with their banks, those that have gone down under, and what decisions then they have to take primarily. But government took the decision because it was in the right interest of the financial sector and the state of our country. That's what it is?
Yes. So the financial services sector, if you look at your economy, you have typically what you call the fiscal and the monetary and the real sector. The real sector is where you find agric, industry and services. And the financial services sector is part of the services in this country. But it is a sector unlike any other. It's a very critical sector because it is the store of our national wealth. Our national wealth literally is stored within the financial services sector. The financial services sector also has the ability to do what we call credit creation, or what we call the multiplier effect. So that if you put 100 Ghana cedis in agriculture or in industry, and you gauged at the end for GDP output, it will be different from if you put 100 Ghana cedis in the financial services sector, because it has the ability to literally, may I say, multiply itself. It's a very critical sector. It holds the wealth of the nation and its people. When your financial services sector crashes, or is not being prudently managed, it has challenges for the national accounts and challenges for individual welfare. People will lose their deposits, poverty will go up, people will die. So the financial services sector is very critical. We all observed, I think even prior to the 2016 election, that the financial services sector was going downhill because of the kind of regulation that was going on there. The regulation was literally loose and lax and allowed people to perpetrate all sorts of infractions within that sector and almost crashed the sector. The new administration appointed new leadership at the central bank that took the view that it was not prudent to continue just putting bandage on the cancer. It was important to reorganize the sector. It was important to restructure the sector. And a number of things were done. Number one was to raise the minimum capital requirement and bring it up to about $100 million equivalent at the time it was initially announced, which is about 400 million Ghana cedis, to ensure that the players in the sector had strong and big balance sheets. It was a difficult exercise. I mean, I think I heard Nkrumah make a very poignant statement on Newsfile on Saturday that what people don't recognize is that many of the people who are being affected, many of the heads who are being affected, are classmates and friends of the new leadership of the central bank. But despite personal relationships, they are able to clearly say, these are the prudential requirements, we cannot let you breach them. So the first thing was to ensure that the players in the sector had stronger balance sheets. Also to ensure as a second item that corporate governance is stronger there. Because the financial services sector, with great respect, is not like other sectors where you are even allowed to, may I say, tone down corporate governance. And so, you know, Act 930, which is the Banking Specialist Deposit Taking Institutions Act, has very, very strong requirements, many of which were not being implemented and are now being implemented. And the prudential requirements also meant that if there were banks that were involved in certain practices that did not qualify to operate as banks, that were involved in literally dissipating depositors' funds, then the central bank had to go in and allow either purchase and assumption transactions or acquisitions or mergers so that stronger banks could literally run them. In essence, you had banks that were challenged with over 1 million depositors having monies in there. The last numbers that we looked at, over about 10 billion Ghana cedis worth of challenges in the banking sector. And we could not just keep giving emergency liquidity assistance and putting plaster on it. The leadership of the central bank had to go in and deal with it. Unfortunately, it's been reported by some as a collapse of the banks and a loss of jobs, when in reality what has happened is that the leadership of the central bank has resolved the banking sector crisis or cancer, has ensured that there are bigger, well-capitalized banks that can take on the weak banks and take on the banks that had literally gone underground. We had banks that were banks in name and were empty. In books, and were surviving on emergency liquidity assistance from the central bank to pay salaries and to pay deposits. Those banks had collapsed and the jobs were gone. You now have leadership from the central bank that says that we'd rather have bigger banks take on those banks. So you have banks that are literally moribund, but now you have bigger banks allowed to do purchase and assumption transactions to take them on, and most importantly ensure that all depositors' funds are saved.
Okay.
All depositors' funds are saved.
A lot of discussions have gone on around this. We've been doing this for months, if not for weeks, and just over the weekend was the
conclusion of the matter,
the climax in itself. But at the end of the day, no matter what the decisions are, of course, savings have been made. People's lives in the medium to long term have been saved.
Jobs have been saved,
etc. But these new entities, the way they've been shaped and formed, will still have to rationalize. They have to take prudent financial decisions in the interest of those institutions. People will still lose jobs.
So,
and those are the human interest issues.
This is the reality. And I give you the example of a bank, for example, that had literally collapsed.
Which bank?
And was on paper. You have gone through the Boulders reports, etc.
Yes, I have.
You know the banks. Some of them are litigating. It will be imprudent for a government official to be going name and name after them. But you know, I think the issues are out there. So I'll give you the example of a bank that had collapsed in name. I mean, that literally collapsed on the books, existed in name, was surviving on emergency liquidity assistance. What it meant was that even if that bank had 500 jobs, all those jobs were gone. And they were surviving on emergency liquidity assistance. Now, when you allow the purchase and assumption transaction and a bigger bank comes in and takes it over, what you call rationalization, they will look at it and say, do we necessarily need like 2 branches on the same street? So maybe we have to move some of the staff to one of the other branches and let some of them go. If you had lost 500 jobs initially, now perhaps you have an opportunity to save 350. I think that the proper way to look at it is that you have actually saved 350 of the 500 jobs that had been lost, as against someone's narrative that says that, oh, the bank was there, and since the rationalization, we've lost about, 150 of those jobs. I don't think that's the proper way to look at it. The proper way to look at it is that those 500 jobs were gone, they were gone. But because of the purchase and assumption transaction and the rationalization, you get to save about 350 of them. Take a bank like Consolidated Bank, that took on about 5 banks, and they are doing very well to retain as many of those jobs. I think perhaps you guys should go back in there and ask leadership, so how far have you come with your staff rationalization exercise? And you'll be impressed that a good number of the jobs, have been retained, contrary to initial reports that a lot of people were going to lose jobs and a lot of people were going to go home. I think,
well, personally, I have two mates. Eventually,
data.
they lost their jobs.
Okay, but a good number of those jobs have also been retained. As I mentioned, even if you lose 150, that's 150 too many. But 500 were gone, and you've literally saved about 350. So it is not a pretty situation, but it was a necessary exercise to ensure that we don't lose or we don't let all 500 lost jobs go underground.
Now, I have an account with GN Bank, so it's my bank. It's now called GN Savings and Loans, meaning that the confidence I have in them should reduce, or
no, you don't have to lose confidence at all.
Or I know that perhaps they can undertake certain transactions because they are in the cap of being savings and loans, etc.
So two things. One of the important things to recognize is that throughout this banking sector resolution, depositors' funds have been saved. No depositor.
In relation to, let's say, GM Bank, for
all
example.
of these banks, no depositor in any of these banks that have been resolved has lost money. That is the very important critical point that we must make. And because all depositors' funds have been saved or have been underwritten by the state, there's no need for panic withdrawals. There's no need for people to lose confidence. The whole exercise is aimed at ensuring that people have confidence in the financial services sector because of its importance. Now, GN Bank, for example, as you're telling me, has been downgraded to a savings and loans company, but you don't lose your money. Your money still stays there. In terms of capitalization, etc., they may not have met the minimum capital requirements to function as a bank, but they will still be a licensed financial institution that can hold your deposit and repay your deposits to you. Of course, there may be some category of services that as a savings and loans company, they may not be allowed to offer. But I do know that the central bank will go through a process with them to wind down those aspects of their business gradually so that there are no shocks in the market. I think it's good that the organization remains an indigenous Ghanaian organization. They have done well to build. And you see, sometimes I think that we unnecessarily mock and criminalize conduct in this country. There are some who have, you know, as we are being told, perpetrated crimes or financial crimes in these organizations. Those are different. And those, as the process goes through, you've seen persons in court, etc., the law will deal with those ones. But there are some who are entrepreneurs who have tried very well to build a strong Ghanaian business and who have had challenges. And that is why you have things like the Ghana Amalgamated Trust coming in to support those who have been on the right path, are doing their things well, and may have had capitalization challenges as well. So I think the important thing is you don't need to lose confidence in any of these institutions. You need to go ahead, keep doing business with them. The government has underwritten deposits there. And now, the good news is that we have 23 well-capitalized, well-managed banks that can fund the next stage of the Ghanaian development agenda.
Over the last 2 years, one of the criticism of the opposition was that government borrows too much.
Well, you say the criticism of the opposition. Some persons have said that it appears that the opposition believes that their job is only to criticize. And therefore, at every turn of the page, they will come up with a criticism, very often about nothing. And I'll refresh your memory on a few things. 2017 budget, the opposition criticized that the formula for calculating the District Assembly's Common Fund was unconstitutional, and they were going to go to court, and they will not participate in the passage of that budget. I'm sure you recall that. In the end, they participated in it because what they were doing was political rhetoric. Because the opposition believes that if they keep up the political rhetoric, they may convince some Ghanaians that they are a better alternative. I recall when the Finance Ministry floated the largest, may I say, bond issuance on a single day to plug our liquidity issues in the very early stages of our government. They said it was illegal. The Finance Minister has sold the country to, you know, one individual, and that they were going to trigger an investigation in the US and go to the Security and Exchange Commission here in Ghana and go to court. You recall all of that? We're here. In the end, this so-called investigation from the US is disappeared into thin air Their processes in Ghana have been shut down by the courts as well. You recall when we were doing the ESLA transaction, they said it was a failure, it was a bomb, it couldn't function, nobody would buy it. We're here. You've seen how much has been raised through the ESLA transaction. I'm just trying to categorize and tell you that this is what the opposition does.
It's normal.
This is what the opposition, the current opposition does. They always want to, raise red flags and create an impression like something untoward has happened. Indeed, if you watch, before every budget, they come up with a prediction, list all sorts of taxes and things. This is going to happen. Things are going to be dangerous. These new taxes are going to be introduced. And very often, they are caught pants down. And they quickly pivot from it and try and move on to the next allegation. So nobody should be surprised when the opposition comes up with anything like this is their stock in trade. But if you go to the specifics, the facts don't support what they are saying. First of all, in this country, we do not count the gross debt stock. What we do is that we count the net. Because even as you are borrowing, you are paying back some of the old liabilities that you have incurred. So you look at net budget financing. And the best way to look at the net budget financing is in two ways. You look at one, what we call the measure of your debt sustainability, your debt to GDP ratio. And then number two, you look at what we call your annual budget deficit. Those are the two globally accepted standards of measure. Because even nominal figures can be deceptive. And I'll give you an example. If I owe 1 million cedis, and let me use Kwesi Twum's son. Kwesi Twum's son owes 1 million cedis. It's not the same thing. Because my 1 million cedis debt may not be backed by assets and productivity worth 1 million or more.
And you're speaking to this in relation to?
Yes.
In relation to
the debt to GDP, for example. So if I owe 1 million Ghana cedis and Kwesi Twum's son owes 1 million Ghana cedis and I don't have productivity and assets that would literally enable me to repay, I may be in a precarious situation. But for Kwesi Twum, who's built multimedia with all the millions of dollars in it, who has a strong balance sheet, if he owes 1 million or if his son owes 1 million, it's not the same thing. So the nominals may be deceptive. To say that I owe 1 million, you owe 1.2 is deceptive. You look at that debt as a percentage of your productivity. And that's what we call the debt to GDP ratio. So for example, at the time we inherited power, debt to GDP ratio was at 73%, 73.1 or so. What it meant was that to literally, if all creditors came one day and said they wanted their money in one day, we would have to put the total productivity of Ghana together for that fiscal year, and it's about 73% of it that will be used to pay back that liability. That meant that our debt had become unsustainable. You needed to do two things. You needed to reduce the rate of debt accumulation. You need to boost growth and GDP so that you would notice that your debt to GDP calculation will come down or your debt to become more sustainable. And indeed, in the very first year, we brought it down from 73 to about 70. We brought it down to about 69, even further, as we entered the second year. Now with the rebasing, we've gone down further to about 56 or so. So the first measure shows you that this nominal argument they made, that, hey, you have borrowed, is something you can literally jettison out of the window because the numbers don't support that narrative. The second is that if you look at our deficits, at the time our brothers left power, they left us a deficit of over 9% of GDP. Even at a time when we were under an IMF program, that said we couldn't do, I think, more than 5%. They left us a deficit of over 9% of GDP. We have succeeded in consistently bringing it down. This year, last year, we brought it down to about 4.8. The final numbers are yet to come out, but our target and what we are seeing is just about 4.8 thereabout. And now we have even gone further to pass a law, a fiscal stability law, to ensure that no government of Ghana, no finance minister, does to us what was done in us or what was done to us in times past, or takes us beyond that 5% threshold. If you want to do it, you need to come to Parliament and get proper state decision before you can penetrate that 5% threshold. And we've even gone further to put a fiscal council and a financial stability council on top to ensure that the challenges in the financial sector are not repeated and the challenges to the fiscal are not repeated. So last year was a good year. These narratives that are, were sold by our friends on the other side is just part of the antics that they put up. However, we will remain focused. We will keep being honest and prudent with the people of Ghana to show them how far we have come and ask for their cooperation and their mandate to continue on the unfinished business.
Be it as it may, usually in election years, we tend to transcend the threshold.
True.
For example, of course, our highest will be in 2012. We witnessed about a deficit around 12%, I remember.
Yes.
It's been a big issue, and of course, it had to come to 9% before they left. ultimately, that'll be their biggest test, despite all the councils and the acts that will be available at the time. How do we intend making sure that we stay within the confines of spending prudently?
I think it boils down to one thing: commitment of the leadership. Because you are right, you can pass the Fiscal Responsibility Act, you can put the Fiscal Council in place and the Financial Stability Council in place, but where the leadership does not have commitment, they will find ways around it. I have, and Ro, you would recall, I have been in this exercise of public examination of what we are doing as a press person, for about a decade. If there's any leader who is stubbornly committed to the Ghana project that I have seen with my very eyes, it is Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo.
You are the information minister. I expect this answer from you.
That is fine, but I'll put all I have, my years of practice, on the line. You've known me for many years. If it is not, I'll probably just keep quiet. But sometimes he's even criticized for being stubborn or for being hard on a particular path, that when he says X, it is X. And I'm telling you that if there's anybody who is committed to the Ghana project, it is President Akufo-Addo. Just this Christmas, even when people beyond the normal or those we've been able to accommodate with the various programs of government were saying that they would also want to see some liquidity, etc. There's a man who said, we have said we are not going beyond 4.8. We are not going beyond 4.8. And you have political actors say, and if you listen to even some of our own party people, they'll say you got to let the cash flow in the system and let money flow in the system. And there's a man who tells you that we have to, above all, keep within this deficit target, else all the work we have done is useless. So I'm saying to you that you need leadership that has the dogged commitment to what it says it will do. You need leadership that says that it will do free SHS and doesn't come back to say, we came to meet more mess, therefore there's not much money. But even when people are complaining that, oh, they want to see it amended, etc., he says that this was the commitment, we are following through on that commitment. So for me, I say to you that what you need is a committed leader. You have that committed leader in President Akufo-Addo. And I will be shocked if in 2020, he throws a spanner in the works and says, because of an election, he's going to throw all caution to the wind and literally undermine all the work that he has done in these first 2 years. I'm pretty confident that he will stick to this fiscal discipline that he has even gone further to put in law. I was at the committee meetings in Parliament, at the Finance Committee, where you had even people from our own side saying, are we sure we want to tie our hands this much? And you should have seen the Finance Minister, the Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, say, yes, I want to tie my hands, literally provide that answer, to ensure that we don't do to ourselves what we've done in times past. So I think it's about commitment. I see that commitment in this leadership, and I'm hopeful that it will be sustained to the very end.
The last time I picked a lot of comments on social media. Usually it will be Facebook. And I think if you look at the seeming comments, they were saying government seemed to be spending so much on the social side. Yeah. We have free this, we have welfare, things that we're spending our monies on. Of course, this year we're told that we'll be having roads, and we all
one of the 6 priority areas this year, infrastructure. Yeah.
Okay, at the end of the day, is it a concern for government that in the medium to long term we could sustain this sort of expenditure or level of expenditure, and if we want to do some tweaking about this, how do we intend to do that to accommodate the exigencies of other sectors?
So, Ro, it is interesting that for a party that is right of center,
very surprising.
Yes, people now say, we notice you're spending a lot on the social side, and I think it is worth noting that though we are right of center, and I think sometimes the intellectual understanding of what we do, we must take time to explain it. A right of center party is a party that believes more in the liberal markets and the trickle-down economics, that let's fix the macro and give people an opportunity to find their own self, and it will trickle down. So it's interesting that even for us, we are the ones who do more social protection programs than our colleagues on the left who are a social democratic party. Indeed, there's this joke now in Parliament and everywhere that name one social protection program. But I think it only undergirds this point that you are making, that for party center of right, we appear to be doing a lot of center of right, a lot of social protection programs. And I'll explain to you why. It's because even though we believe in trickle-down economics, that first fix the macro, fix the fundamentals, let the private sector be the driver of growth, even though we believe in that, we also believe that, or we know that inequality and poverty is real, and that trickle-down economics may take a while to trickle down to the last person down there. And that if we don't do anything to hold the vulnerable in the society, trickling down may not hit them early enough. And that is why, while we fix, so you'll notice that it's a two-pronged approach. While we are focused on fixing the macro and opening up the space for the private sector to function, build stronger banks, improve credit, improve our ratings, get energy stable so that people can function, try and open new aspects of the economy to people. While we are doing that at the top, also at the bottom, we are not waiting for people to fall through the cracks. We are introducing social protection programs that hold the very vulnerable in our society. We're expanding LEAP, we're expanding school feeding program. We've brought in place the free senior high school program, the national health insurance program that has literally collapsed. And you saw healthcare providers literally announcing that they were all going on strike. Even the religious healthcare providers, who you say out of mercy would take care of us, threatened that they were going on strike somewhere in 2016. We've been able to hold that by improving on the NHIS, etc. So it is out of a clear understanding that we need to hold the bottom, even as we fix the top. To fund that, it means that national revenues have to improve. Because like you said, if growth is not coming, and if people are not making incomes, and national revenues are not improving, then you have a sustainability problem. And that's why you notice that since 2017, the government has been working to improve what we call DMR, Domestic Resource Mobilization, or DRM, Domestic Resource Mobilization. And our numbers have gone up. We may not have hit our own targets because, as we say sometimes, our targets sometimes are a bit ambitious. We believe in stretching ourselves. So we may not have hit all our revenue targets, but our revenue has improved higher than what we got in 2016. And now with the things that we're doing on, for example, getting everybody enrolled on TIN, on getting VAT automated with the point of sale terminals, on some of the amended tax handles that we have done, we expect that domestic resource mobilization will improve. Now with growth picking up and incomes picking up, we expect that therefore what flows into the national kitty, consequently, now that you're widening the tax net, will also improve. Then we have more resources to handle the social protection programs that we have taken on board, and also at the same time fund the next level of the development agenda of our country. And our 2019 budget, as well as the medium-term expenditure framework, outlines that quite clearly.
One of the rhetorics or promises at the time was that in expanding the tax net, the huge database of identified Ghanaians, or even those that were residing in our country, would be the base or premise on which we can expand the tax net. Now we're having to do a bit of VAT, registering people, TIN, etc. Forgetting that the whole agenda was to make sure that we had a comprehensive national identification system over time. It seems to have lagged a bit in terms of the time span.
Admittedly, we haven't finished with the numbers on track. But you would notice that we have gone very far with the national identification exercise. I think
we haven't.
We have. The last major one was in Adenta, where they even exceeded the numbers they were looking for.
Yeah, but Adenta is just a microcosm of the.
But of course, we have several other districts across this country where the exercise needs to be taken, and that's why I say, admittedly, in terms of the timetable, we may be lagging a bit behind. But the national identification program is ongoing. We are registering Ghanaians. People are picking up their cards on a regular basis. I think that the judgment of whether we have succeeded or failed in that exercise will come by the time we are hitting 2020, where you look at the number of Ghanaians on the projected roll and ask how many of us have cards. As we go through the process, of course, for everything that we are doing, there are hiccups you have to manage and get on track. But I am clear in my mind, and I am convinced. Professor Atefa and his team, we have interacted with them severally. They are on track. I've got my ID card. I know many other people who have. And I think what we can do is to encourage them to speed up the process, keep on track, and ensure that we have as many as possible registered by the time we are due for counting. Now, that does not mean that while we are doing that, today, what we have, which is the tax identification number, should be abandoned. No, we should today And you notice that at the end of the day, our objective is to map these numbers onto each other. So today, while we are finishing with the national ID exercise, we have to do well to get the 10 numbers in place. And the 10 numbers, I think the next time you get to engage the head of the GRA, can give you updated numbers. The numbers I saw as targets, at least last year, I haven't seen the final out 10, were quite impressive. They were targeting, at the time, about 1 million extra people onto the roll. NAPCO has put about 10,000 people in the system to try and whip up how quickly we can get these 10 numbers. So the idea is to get all of these people identified so that we can know who has what tax liability, appropriate that liability to the state, and use it to fund both the development and the social protection programs we're talking about.
The President, during the interaction, recently you convened with the media, said that during the district level elections, we'll have an attached or a complement of
a
referendum as to whether Ghanaians would want to elect
district chief executives on partisan basis.
Yes, on partisan basis.
Yes.
That will be taking place in
2019 this year, when we have the
expect
district assembly elections, and we want to encourage Ghanaians to take that particular district assembly election and the referendum associated with it very seriously, because of the traditional view that district assembly elections are not very well patronized. But contrary to the view that these referenda might cost us a lot, we found a very good way of marrying it with the district assembly election so that it doesn't come at an extra cost to us, but we give Ghanaians the opportunity to take that decision, because it is an entrenched clause in the Constitution. And despite the political promise that we will move to a place where DCs are elective, Ghanaians need to take that decision. And we encourage Ghanaians to go to the polls and to join us in that view, so that decentralization is deepened and accountability is brought to the very bottom. Again, I hear a lot of people say, if you are in government and, for example, you are in a district that is not sympathetic to the ruling government, are you not giving power away? I can tell you on authority, and I am sure I would not have any challenge with the president saying this, we have key party people who disagree with the president's view.
To go partisan?
Yes, that we should not allow, this election at the district level, especially even on the partisan basis. And the president says, no, it is what will bring decentralization to a stronger level,
meaning that, let's say we have an NDC government,
yes,
but we have the mass of district or MMDCs in the eastern region being mainly NPP or backed by NPP.
There's that fear that you have challenges in exercising control in that particular district. You have the District Security Council,
I have that fear.
Well, so
you don't have that fear.
I am making that point.
Or you're saying the president doesn't have that fear. What's your fear?
I am making that point in two regards. Number one, it again goes further to demonstrate what I call the dogged commitment of President Akufo-Addo to some policy positions.
Very interesting, don't you think? How is that going to work out, for example?
Well, so first, it's important to recognize that you have a leader who is committed and principled, that even when there are these fears expressed, he says, I believe in the Ghanaian people. I believe that in the end they will make a right choice, and that in the end they will manage these circumstances pretty well.
No, I tell you, we have a district level election. We're going to have a referendum, and it's going to be a yes vote. We want it on partisan lines, and it's going to happen.
That is fine.
But I'm saying practically.
That is fine.
How's it going to work?
It brings now to bear a second level of work that needs to be done to ensure that the rubrics of governance at the local level are shaped to accommodate some of these challenges. There are jurisdictions where you have governors not from the ruling party or governors from opposition parties. What can we learn from them on how this is managed? But above all, it is important for people on the ground to be accountable to the people on the ground. It is important, and the president holds the belief, the government shares that belief, that in the end, even when you have people who are not sympathetic to the cause of the ruling party, elected as district chief executives on the ground, their first obligation, their first interest, is not to sabotage the state or the center, but is to be accountable, because if they are not accountable and successful on the ground, their own people will remove them and bring someone else who is there, or someone else who perhaps even belongs to their own political persuasion. So it is in their own interest to be accountable to the people of the ground and to do what is in the best interest of the people on the ground.
We know that,
and we believe that that is a check enough on this fear that somebody on the ground will seek to sabotage the central government.
But Kojo, we know that in our part of the world, many things revolve around government. especially when it comes to the pattern of our socio-economic development. And so budgetary issues usually would have to trickle from the top to the bottom. And there's the fear that if you have a government of another political persuasion and an MMDC of another political persuasion, the trickle-down effect may not work effectively.
That cannot happen.
Why not?
Today is Constitution Day, first of all. We have a constitution.
It's not a religious day.
No.
So that's the thing. And politics is not about religion.
It is even better that it's not a religious day. We have a constitution that gives every district what we call the District Assembly's Common Fund, whose formula is brought to Parliament and is looked at and is distributed.
Very well.
And the fund administrator does not have a choice that because this DC does not come from my political persuasion, I will not release their money to them. The fund administrator does not have that choice. Will be in contempt of Parliament, will be committing an illegality, is subject to court processes if he or she chooses so to do. So that cannot happen. What will rather happen is that every DC, now that he is accountable to his own people, wants to ensure that he meets the people's expectations. So if you are getting, let's say, 100,000 cedis from the District Assembly's Common Fund for the quarter, a good DC is the one who says that I want to improve on my own domestic resource mobilization. One of the areas where we falter a lot is in domestic resource mobilization at the local level. Property rates, for example. Look at where we live in Accra. Go to airport and many of these places. I don't know if you recall, or if your colleagues here will recall, how much we all pay for. I was embarrassed when I paid my last property rate, because I thought that looking at where I live in Def Traco, in Tema, I should be paying a bit more. If you have MMDCs who are elected, who know that they have to go back on campaign and show what they have done, and who cannot get the excuse that the common fund didn't come, I didn't get the money, they will be primed to look for ways of raising more revenue on the ground to deliver on the agenda. So rather, it works to our advantage, and that's why the government shares the president's view. That's why the government holds that view, that in the long run, it will benefit us.
But there's some main infrastructure and allocations that are not within the purview and even outside the boundaries of internal revenue generated. Roads.
Those are central government.
Yes, but the central government, knowing that it's not as strong or can decide.
No.
It's a Constitution Day, you say.
Yes. Every political enterprise is structured to bring on board more. Every political party is structured in a way that seeks to bring on board more into its fold. We
could have a skewing of the developmental parties.
The accounts have a proverb that nsamanfo krampo penedodo nenyate asefo. Even the ghosts want to have some more ghosts in their fold, not the living. The point I'm making to you is this: every political party, every government will seek to do so well that even in places that are considered their may I say Waterloo, or places that are not considered their strongholds, they can fetch more votes. How do you do that? You develop these areas. Because if you don't develop these areas, you are not going to get, in fact, even if in your own areas you fail to develop, you're going to lose votes. So rather, where central government has to distribute projects across the country, it is in our interest to ensure that it goes to places where we traditionally don't do well, in addition to the places where we do well, so that we can get some more votes from those places. So again, I don't see how this works to our disadvantage.
And relatedly, we just convened a referendum to approve new regions, so 6 of them.
Yes, that's going to take us to 16. I think that we should be expecting the executive instrument and then the designation of the capitals as well.
And one of the main issues that we're told were for rationale was that we wanted to broaden the pattern of development, etc. How much are we giving each of them?
About 20 million Ghana cedis for each of these new regions. So once they are designated as a region, a number of things must happen. They're going to have regional coordinating councils that now have a smaller, may I say, geographic area to focus on. You're going to have regional hospitals. You're going to have all sorts of regional institutions put there to bring the focus of development into a smaller area a bit more. And it's our expectation that even beyond the 20 million seed money that they are being given, even beyond the institutions that are going into these areas, you will see a quickening of the development pace in these areas as well.
We'll see how that goes. And have we been able to perhaps cool down, make sure calm heads prevail in some of those areas, notably prior to the referendum, or we had some agitations about, well, some inhabitants in those areas not wanting to be part of the region?
Well, I mean, I think it is their right not to be part of it, and they chose not to participate in the process. Others participated in the process. That's the beauty of our democracy. If you speak to the Honorable Dan Kwekubochwe, he will tell you that during the plebiscite, for example, not everybody participated, not everybody voted yes. But in the end, what the law says must be brought to bear. There are those who have said that they would prefer to stay in one region or the other. But that is the essence of the referendum, so that you express it in an organized manner at the polls. And whatever the popular decision is, we all have to abide by those popular decisions.
I've been told that apparently your one district, one factory initiative is not doing so well.
Who's saying that?
It's out there.
That would be a wrong view. I gave an update, I think somewhere in October, at the ministry during one of our briefings. The president mentioned that the numbers suggested that at the end of the year 2018, we'll have about 79 of them at various stages of completion. I do know that as we are starting this new year, the minister will be giving an update to the president, especially as he prepares for the State of the Nation address. And I'm very confident that we'll be impressed with what we hear. And right after that, we're going to have a whole exercise of going around the country and examining some of the works that have been done. I'll probably invite you along so that we can go see some of these factories out there for ourselves. You recall that in many of the president's tours, he has been opening some of these factories. He's been visiting some of these factories. People disagree with how the program has been structured or whether or not we have finished all about 154, 160 so far. We haven't finished the 160 so far. The mark that was given was that by the end of last year, about 79 of them at various stages of completion. I'm sure as we start this new year, we'll have an opportunity to examine where we are on all of this. But the important thing is that you have a government that has a vision that we should industrialize, starting with the one district, one factory concept. You have another political entity that does not share that vision. It is significant. Then you have those who share that vision come to power and in 2 years put about 79 at various stages of completion, as compared to the alternative, which will most likely have been 0 on the other side, because they don't share that vision. I think it's significant. So I think the view that is not going well is not a fair view. It's good how far we've come. Let's examine it. Let's see how we can build upon it. But I think that it's a good beginning so far. One of the major things we are doing differently is not building factories before we look for raw materials. I've watched JoyNews cover factories that were built when the raw material had not been sorted out, and which are literally white elephants sitting there now. And now there's a need to find equity to give to outgrower farmers to grow raw material for the factory. You're finding a reverse where in many places, for in Nkrumah, for example, where we went and designated the land and said, let construction start. If you took your cameras there, you see how much work has been done on the Nkrumah factory. And at the same time, the raw material is being grown so that by the time the factory is completed, you don't have a repetition of what you had in times past, where you have a nice flashy factory but no raw material to it. So I think it's an improvement on what we have experienced in times past.
But curiously though, you get to notice that in some of the factories that the president visited, some of them were old or had been in existence, and so had some external support to do expansion under the initiative. Is that what it is?
But again, if you go to our manifesto, we never said that the government of Ghana will build new factories in every district.
You said you were going to build new factories and expand existing ones?
No.
Is that what was said?
No. I would ask you to just pull up the text of the manifesto and let everybody read it. Because sometimes when we are reporting what the politician has said, we report it in a manner that we think perhaps is juicy to sell. But that is why I like going to the text of what we said. We said we're going to collaborate with the private sector to start an industrialization exercise by ensuring that in every district there's a factory.
You are saying we misreport?
I'm not going to go into a head-on battle with you. I'm putting it in its context. And I encourage you to put it up for your viewers to read what we said. Okay. And I'm sure that we shall all understand it. The program includes revamping factories that were having challenges in their own district. What is the use in starting a brand new factory? For example, if you come to Achimodan, there were many factories that have literally run down over the years because of various challenges. And then we say because of one district, one factory, we're abandoning all of those factories, some of which had proven business models. We're abandoning all of those ones just to go and start a new one. It wouldn't make sense. If there's a factory out there that has run aground or that has had challenges and is not able to produce because of the economic challenges we went through, as part of our one district, one factory program, the interventions that government provides, we can provide those interventions to that factory for that factory to be reformed. That does not mean that because that factory was set up many years ago and it has run aground. And we have revived it under the One District, One Factory program. Something untoward has happened. The important thing is that we have brought life back to that factory. It has created jobs. It created economic activity in that area. That's what we are interested in.
I agree with you on that. I think that's a good one. It's, because I lived in the Tema area. I grew up in Ashaiman. So a number of people who had worked in some of those state factories that now had gone down under. And that would be a good thing to have government extend support to them. But I wanted to know whether you saw them. You know, there was this, I don't know whether it was, is it a pie chart? Or, you know, that designated a type of factory in which area or sector in every
Yes, that
district.
was a national map that showed the resource potential of every district.
All right.
And gave direction to potential investors that, for example, when you come to that Samankese enclave, it's a very good enclave for citrus because there are a lot of orange farms.
Is there a blueprint that we can
It is.
Yes,
yes, it is. It's available. But it is only a signal to potential investors. It's not something for us to say that then here. So, for example, if in the Samankese enclave, the initial blueprint said that there's an enclave where you have a lot of citrus farms. So it would be good to site a citrus factory here to process. So on the map, when you zoom into a Samankese, you see citrus there. It doesn't mean that if you went and then you saw a mango processing factory, then it means our government has failed. Because remember, in the end, the decision to site the factory is the decision of the private sector operator. Government facilitates by making it easier for them. The question is, what are your inhibiting factors? Why are you not there already? How do we take that pain point away so that it is easier for you to go? That's the job of government. And that's what we're doing.
All right. I have to say, the most successful of all your initiatives is
in your opinion?
My opinion.
Yeah.
Is the free SHS initiative.
Very well. Very well.
But people still pay fees, though. But of course, it's still successful.
No, people don't pay fees.
They pay some fees. No, I'm not. They pay,
remember, we have said that
they pay some fees for either clothing or.
They don't pay fees. I mean, clothing, etc., have been provided as part of the free SHS
house dress
program. No, they have been provided. What is happening is that you may find instances in which the Parent-Teacher Association says that they would like to provide an extra logistic in the school. Then they get permission to, among themselves, make that contribution. Those are not fees. We have been very clear to say that head teachers that hide under some of these things to begin to charge what they should not be charging will be sanctioned, and indeed you've seen some heads
the PTA
that have been sanctioned. No, so you would realize that that becomes the exception and not the norm. I think the important thing, and you always find people who would either criticize or oppose or find something to say about the free SHS program. We recently, heard the former president saying that the schools have not been fumigated, and then we had to show him the numbers that, with great respect, that is not correct. The schools have been fumigated, unlike in his day when you wouldn't find that extensive fumigation exercise going on. We've done the double track, which has ensured that even though the numbers have gone up, we're able to use the facilities and avoid congestion, and at the same time floated about 1.5 billion for GET Fund to complete the outstanding facility. So I'm not surprised you describe it as, in your opinion, one of our most successful interventions so far. A lot of people share that view. We are committed to ensure that that promise, which is to ensure that every Ghanaian child has access to education paid for by the state, comes to fruition, and we'll continue on that path.
Well, I wish you all the best for the year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, bro.
Happy New Year, bro.
Oh, I've been speaking to Oppong Nkrumah, the Minister for Information, but also the Member of Parliament for Ofuanse Ayobi. I hope that you've enjoyed the discussion. Of course, there will be uploads on social media, but more so our channel on YouTube. And so make sure that you go check out our channel, Budget Online TV on YouTube. All right, now we have to do some security discussions, and we know that there's been some level of violence being reported out of Treponi. The Vice President has had a word or two on the subject when he addressed the Ahmadiyya Muslim mission over the weekend, but also we've been touching base with our correspondent. We'll have some great discussion on the subject, get the latest out of Treponi and the security situation there, and make sure that we bring you the latest update. Right now we have to take a break. When we come back, we'll have all that for you.